my channel. So I wanted to do an update on my Sakizo build. However, I have done very little on it this week because I was out of town for most of the week, and then I actually wound up getting a little ill the last couple of days. I'm still a little under the weather, but I wanted to make sure that I got my video out this week. So rather than doing the update that I wanted to do, I actually wanted to talk about what I was out of town for instead, which is the Sailor Moon Super Live stage play musical that is going on a North American tour. So I want to give an overview of that and give my thoughts on it, a little conversation around the costuming, a fun discussion about something that you may not be aware is going on, because I have been on their social medias lately. They do not have a lot of followers, and I was very surprised by that. So I don't know how many people are talking about it, but I wanted to talk about my experience with it. If that's something that you like and you wind up liking this video, make sure to hit the like button and of course subscribe for more content from me. So with that, let's go ahead and hop on into it. I traveled 1,000 miles to go fulfill a 20+ year dream of mine, and that was to see one of these Sailor Moon musicals live. If you are not familiar with the Sailor Moon musicals, it's actually called Sera Myu. It is a musical based on the Japanese anime Sailor Moon. In Japan, musicals and plays being made of very popular anime has been something that's been around for a really long time, and Sailor Moon, Sera Myus, are no different. I think they go back to the early 90s. First one I saw was a 1996 production, which I just recently found on YouTube, and will make sure that I put it in the description below so that you can check it out if you want to. It is still my all-time favorite Sera Myu. My story around this musical is actually kind of funny. So when I was 13 years old, we had just gotten the internet in my very small country town, and I stumbled upon anime, and through all of that I stumbled upon the Sera Myu. I didn't really know what they were, but there was a thing that people did back then called distribution rings, where we would make copies of anime or movies or whatever that were not licensed in our own country, and we would trade them with other people for copies. That is how us old folk got a hold of anime that was not released in the United States. Sometimes they would be fan subbed, sometimes they would be fan dubbed, and sometimes they would be in complete Japanese, and we would just have to do our best to guess what they are. This is how I discovered anime such as Fushigi Yugi, which is my second favorite anime. I found something called Those Who Hunt Elves. I barely remember it, but I did have it, and this is how I got my hands on a copy of this 1996 Sera Myu. It was a VHS tape though, and it was not subtitled, and it was a copy of an officially released recording in Japan, and I put that in the VCR and I sat and I watched it. This was before I discovered the 5th and final season of Sailor Moon called Sailor Moon Stars, which at the time and up until very recently, like the past 3 or 4 years, it was never released in the United States that last season. It was a bit controversial for the time, but they made a stage production of it, and I sat and I watched it, and I tried to guess what was happening, and it turns out I was way off whenever I eventually got to watch a subtitled version 15+ years later on YouTube. But what is fun is that I wound up really enjoying it. I loved the music, I loved the acting, the performance. It was extremely low tech because that tape was from 1996. I got it in the early 2000s, not in 1996, just to clarify the timing. But I fell in love with that tape, and so I was able to actually get a second tape for a different musical, which was one that was released in I think 2001, where the main actress, if I remember correctly, was 12 years old and phenomenal in her role. That one redid the Sailor Moon arc with Wicked Lady and Prince Demand, another phenomenal show. I didn't get my hands on any others for a very, very long time, but I still loved these musicals, and I someday had the dream of being able to see one in person. But, you know, I grew up, I went to college, it sort of went on the back burner, and I just assumed that they stopped making these musicals, and they actually did for a short period of time. Let me tell you my surprise when I stumbled on Facebook in one of my Sailor Moon fan groups that there was going to be a North American tour of one of these Sailor Moon musicals. I lost it. Like, that was something I legitimately never thought would happen. The musicals can be a little cheesy, and when I was younger, being into anime was definitely considered a dorky thing to do, so I was very secretive about it. I didn't get into cosplay until I was an adult because of those negative connotations in my small tiny hometown. I really didn't even know cosplay was a thing until I was an adult. Once I grew up and got the freedom of not caring about what people thought about me and just being able to express myself, I dove back into my favorite things like Sailor Moon, and I started rewatching the live action Sailor Moon, discovered that there's a bunch more and that they're still ongoing, and you can find a lot of them on YouTube subbed, which is amazing, and how I found out that my guess of the storyline was completely wrong. And I never lost my love of Sailor Moon, and it has just gotten stronger. And so of course when I saw this, I had to go see it. So they were slowly announcing cities they were going to go to. It started off with a relatively small list, and then more cities got announced, Nothing got announced for Florida, and I was very sad. However, interestingly enough, one got announced for St. Louis, Missouri. I used to live in St. Louis, Missouri before Florida, and it's very, well, I wouldn't say very close, it's within an hour or so of where I grew up in Illinois. And I thought, well, this is the perfect time to go visit friends and family, accomplish one of my all-time long-standing dreams. So I booked the tickets before I even had a flight or hotel, started planning everything out, and got it set. I was going to see Sailor Moon live on stage. It was not an easy trip though. This is the time that I found out that I usually fly Spirit, have actually canceled the route that I would use to get to St. Louis from Florida, so that's exciting. But I needed to fly for cheap. We actually wound up flying to Chicago and then taking a 5.5 hour train from Chicago to St. Louis. I thought it was going to be a fine trip. I gave myself a 3-hour buffer between the train and the plane. I did not count on the fact that when we landed, we would sit on the tarmac for an hour, and then we would wait for an hour in O'Hare for our luggage. It was so weird. They started to put our luggage on the belt, and 10-15 bags came out, and then they stopped the conveyor belt, literally with a bag halfway out of like the flappy cover thing. And then we just waited for 45 minutes until enough people started going to the attendant and asking over and over and over again what's happening that they finally called someone, and immediately the belt started up, and my bag was the 4th one to come out, which is very frustrating, but fortunate because it was going to take us an hour to get to Amtrak, and it did. We got to Amtrak right as they started boarding, so fortunately we did make it with about 20 minutes to spare, but it was very stressful. But then we took the 5.5 hour train ride to St. Louis, got to our hotel. We wound up arriving on Saturday, which gave me plenty of time to hang out with friends and family before the show on Tuesday, and then we left on Wednesday. They only did one show in St. Louis. These girls, this production, their travel is insane. They do a show and then they leave, and 2 days later they do a show in another city. They're going all over the country and performing like every 2 days. That seems incredibly exhausting, but they did such an amazing job. So that was my trip there. So let me tell you about my experience at the show. So I had been watching some discourse online for the past few weeks. I follow a fan page of the musical, and I follow several other Sailor Moon fan pages, and they've all been talking about the show. And one of the warnings that kept coming up is get to the show early to get in line for merchandise if merchandise is what you want to get. I, of course, wanted a t-shirt and the tote bag. I really needed to get there early. However, at the St. Louis Fox, which is a beautiful theater, by the way, they don't open their doors until 6:30. I did not think about the fact that people would be lining up outside of the theater earlier than that. So I got there right when the doors open. And as soon as we walked in, we got our ticket scanned, we walked in, the merchandise line was packed. We wound up, so there's this, I wish I would have gotten a video of this. So you walk into the lobby, ropes set up in a turn back style, like at a roller coaster, so that it filled up the entire lobby, and then it wrapped around out into the hallway, and then it went upstairs a couple of flights, and that is where I got in line, about 2 flights up. but it kept going. We apparently were incredibly lucky. We waited in line for 45 minutes, and after about the 40-minute mark, they said everyone who's currently in line can still get merchandise, but we're cutting it off. And there was no intermission in the show, which no one warned me about. So if you're going to go see the show, there's no intermission. It only took us 5 minutes from that point to actually go and get what we wanted. I actually wound up getting a pin, and my husband surprised me with the hoodie, so I got everything that I wanted. And then I had 15 minutes to spare to go get my seat and sit down. I will tell you there is some other discourse happening with the show. So there's a moment in the show where there are these light sticks that are being used, very much like a K-pop show. The light stick are $20 and they are special. They have like the silhouette of the senshi inside of them. I think they're multicolored. I don't really know, but everybody wants these light sticks. I'm not super big into K-pop, so I don't understand the appeal, but I get it. And I found out actually after the show started, they announced that they didn't want anybody to use the light sticks until this very special part at the end. I personally don't think the light sticks are worth it for this 1.5 minute part at the very end, but a lot of people got them. But I will tell you the discourse is that, so for $20 you get the special light stick. However, this show has had an incredibly difficult time keeping merchandise on hand. They keep selling out. I think they underestimated how popular the show would be in every city that they've gone to, because I keep hearing nonstop about things selling out. Photo cards and the light sticks seem to be the top two. Light sticks, though, they've been replacing them with just plain white light sticks that don't have the senshi silhouette on them, and charging the exact same amount, so $20. There's a ton of discourse about that online, because why would you pay $20 for a $5 stick you can get on Amazon? People would pay $20 for the special stick, and some people knew there were special ones and some people didn't. And so like that's been happening online. So I wasn't sure what was true, but I will tell you, I sat between both. The people on my right had the really cool light sticks with the senshi on them, and the people directly to my left had the plain ones. They didn't turn color, they were only white, and they did not have the senshi silhouette on them. And I was asking them about it, and they were unaware that there were special ones out there. So I don't know, but my advice is if you want a light stick or if you want any merchandise, get there an hour before the doors open to make sure that you're in the front of the line versus getting there right when the doors open, because it can take a while to get through. They did open the merchandise again at the end of the show, but I would bet that most of the stuff was sold out. They seem to have plenty of t-shirts and hoodies and tote bags. So we grabbed our seat and I finally got to look at the stage. I did not expect much from the stage given that it is a traveling show. They can only take so much with them. When you have other productions of Sailor Moon musicals, you can get pretty fabulous sets and changes and stuff like that. This set never changed, but it was pretty neat to see. It was like an LED cityscape with a stage and some stairs, and then they had this big screen set up in the middle that they utilized wonderfully. They really were pushing on people to not record things. I respected that mostly. At the very end, I was a little naughty about it. I really wanted to get Lost Soldier, but that's not the point. But anyway, I totally understand that the set was minimal. The cast was also very minimal. They utilized the screen in a really neat way. So they subtitled everything on the screen because the show is completely in Japanese. But they did the subtitles on the screen in a manga comic book type fashion. So someone would be talking and a speech bubble would appear above where they're standing to show to translate it for you. I thought that was super clever. And then the lyrics in the songs were animated and colored, and it looked very pretty. And there were times like when Sailor Mars posed, she sort of posed with her hands up and her ravens flew and landed on her arms on the screen. It was so clever. If you're into doing cosplay skits, I recommend seeing the show to see how they utilize that screen, because like Wholemet has a screen like that where you can do animations, and it was just incredibly clever. I really like that a lot. So it starts off, you know, with just like the screen, and it's giving some announcements like don't take pictures. There'll be a special time at the end where everyone is perfectly allowed to record video. So you don't use the light sticks until the special part at the end as well. And then, you know, the show started, and let me tell you, this theater was packed. I wonder if they sold out. According to their page, it was the largest theater they had on the entire tour. And I love this theater. I know it very well. It is huge, and from my position, it looked full. I actually didn't even think about what the show is going to be. I refused to look at spoilers, but I will let you know. From here on out, I may accidentally say some spoilers, so if you're wanting to, wait until you see it, feel free to tune out here. I just didn't think about the type of show it would be. It had Queen Beryl in it as the main enemy. We do kind of skip over how Sailor Moon becomes Sailor Moon through a song and animation, which is really cool. It gives you a great overview. And then you get a little update into Sailor Moon and how she, like, the first 10 minutes are just like a brief overview of Sailor Moon, how she became Sailor Moon, and the fact that she's the crybaby and clumsy and really bad at school. And you meet Darien, as we know him from the English dub, and you meet the other Senshi. It is a lot of introduction. You get this very long introduction of the Senshi and the characters in the beginning, and then the story progresses and they introduce themselves again. Now, I know in the show they introduce their Sailor-ness every time. So like in every episode, it's like, I'm Sailor Moon and I'm Sailor Mars. But you don't say, I'm Usagi Tsukino, I'm Minako. They don't say those every single time. In this show, they kind of said their introductions of themselves and their personality 4 or 5 different times, like constantly. There would be a little bit of a scene and then they're introducing themselves again, and then a little bit of a scene and they're introducing themselves again. So then it would be like, Ami, she's so smart, yay! And then this is Ray, and she's so passionate. And let's not forget about Crybaby, Usagi, and like it happened a lot. I enjoyed it, but it did feel simplified and overly explanatory. So my thought is that they did sort of simplify it down quite a bit for the North American audience. To be fair, it makes sense if you think from a production company that most people in the United States have probably never heard of a Sailor Moon musical, and they don't know how the stage productions work. Perfectly fine. I would say people who are in the fandom probably have seen a Sera Myu or two, or clips from the live actions. I was expecting it to be closer to what they do in Japan, but it makes sense. This is their first North American tour. My hope is that they do this again. I hope they are so incredibly successful they do it again and they do a bit more of a complex production. It was a lot. My husband, who does not like Sailor Moon but came with me anyway, that was his comment, was they kept introducing themselves. And actually one thing he kept saying was they also kept calling Usagi a crybaby, like introducing her as a crybaby. Just like, yes, you're Usagi Tsukino, a crybaby, but you're amazing, over and over and over again. My comment back to him was, it would be an interesting drinking game if you took a sip every time they said the word princess. That was probably the most used word in the entire production, but it was very much, so it was a 90-minute show and is very much an overview of the first season. You have Sailor V briefly, they're after the crystal, Beryl is here stealing energy. It was very condensed. When I actually went back on the flight home and watched one of the musicals, that was over 2 hours long. So it was definitely shortened for our audience and, like I said, simplified. So go in knowing that it's not going to be a super complex show, and it's going to feel a little rushed if you're very familiar with the series like I am. But let me tell you, the performances were phenomenal. They just embodied their characters. I love the girls they got to play the Sailor Senshi, especially Sailor Moon. I thought she did such a fantastic job. Her acting was great. Her singing was great. She had energy from start to finish, which, if you know Sailor Moon, she is hyperactive. I do not know how she is hyperactive, and so was the actress. And then actually one of my friends who went to the show as well, she thought Jupiter was perfect, like the best embodiment of Jupiter. And she had never seen a Sailor Moon musical before, but she actually believe her words were, so I was surprised with how much I liked it. And then the person they got to play Beryl, I thought she was fabulous. I loved her. Her singing was a little screechy here and there, but I think that was a choice. But she got some fun songs. They sort of did a Vegas theme with her, which I thought was perfect. So the music was great. The performance was great. So I won't go into too much more detail about that. I will say that at the end, that is where the light stick thing happens. The girls are not even on stage. Like they only have the 4 backup dancers on stage with light sticks, and It's just kind of like a rave music. There's no words to it. There's like disco lighting going, and then the people on stage have their light sticks, and that's when you use your light stick, and that's it. It's about, I don't know, 90 seconds long, so it didn't seem very long, but that was it with the light sticks. They didn't seem to care if anyone used them for the rest of the performance, which was all like bonus songs, but not many people did. So I personally just don't think the light sticks are worth it, but if that's your thing, go for it. And then they performed a couple of extra songs. They actually did one in kimono, which was really pretty. I was waiting because there is a song that's performed at the end of, I think, every single Sailor Moon musical. It's called Lost Soldier. It is one of my all-time favorite Sailor Moon songs. It's just a beautiful song. When it started playing, a ton of people started cheering, so I think we had a lot of people in the theater that have seen Sera Myu before, which was just incredible to hear. So that's usually the last song of the show. I can't remember if that was the last, if that wound up being the last show here, but it's really neat. I wish I had been recording. So they do say that you're allowed to record when they do Moonlight Densetsu. That may have been the last one. I just can't remember, but everyone had run off stage, and the girl playing Usagi said, "Thank you, St. Louis." And I really wish I would have recorded that, because I don't know, that just touched me a lot. I'm sure, I mean, they're doing it in every city, but I don't know, hearing her say that just sort of felt like you did it. You did it. You finally got to fulfill this dream. This is something I've been wanting to do since I was a kid, and here I am. I had just watched a live action Sailor Moon musical in person, and weirdly in St. Louis, Missouri, no less. I was supposed to go see one in 2021, 2022, 2023, but they kept canceling our trip because of COVID. The country kept, closing down who could visit. So I honestly wasn't sure if this was ever going to happen, and here it did. Like, I cannot express enough how important this was to fulfill something like that. I don't know, it seems kind of silly, but it really did mean a lot to me. Anyway, so my camera died and I don't remember what I was saying, so I'm just going to do a quick commentary on the costuming that I wanted to go over to sort of keep this a little costuming related. So I'm not a big fan of the costumes in this show. They do the skirt petticoat combo that I just think looks a little weird. They just don't quite go together. I do prefer the costumes from the last couple of years where they don't have these petticoats, but they're very elaborate and beautiful. I started on the 1996 version where we get these costumes that are extremely elaborate, very metallic, and they have these exaggerated shoulder points. They're not my favorite, but I do like them. I feel like the North American one definitely leaned into this more plain thing, which maybe it's for durable reasons. The costumes have to travel a lot, so maybe they were just being careful to not do anything too crazy so that they can survive the entire tour, or maybe they were uncertain of how the North American audiences would react to something a bit more exaggerated. Not a big fan of that part of the skirt or the sparingly used sequins on the skirt. I think they could have made them more sparkly, like the Sailor Moon dinner theater, Shining Moon Tokyo, that's what it was called, that the pandemic unfortunately destroyed. With that, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up here. I just wanted to give a little bit of a review of the show that I saw. I loved it. I think it's worth seeing. It's a little overly simplified, but the music and performances are phenomenal. So if you get a chance to go see it, I highly recommend it. If you're a Sailor Moon fan, we can support the show and hopefully keep these tours going because they are so worth it. If you can't make it to a show, I highly recommend looking for some of them on YouTube. They are just a fun thing to see, and there's some excellent music in there. With that, all I have for you today. Next week I should have a better update on my leather corset I'm working on, if not the finished video walking through how I made it from start to finish. We'll just see how far I can get. The painting is taking a lot longer than I thought because it needs to dry very thoroughly before I can do anything like gold leaf it. So I'm just taking my time with that, and the gold paint requires several coats, so that's just taking a lot longer than I want it to, but progress is progress. And I'm nearly complete with my third panel. The fourth panel embroidery is done, so I'll be well deep in beating that, so I'm making progress. And my pearl and my check pearl have arrived, so I can work on finishing up the flowers on these panels. Other than that, things are progressing. I am going to have to pause this so that I can remake the skirt on my Ravenna. That shouldn't take me too long. I want to make something a little better if I do get to compete at MomoCon. that just needs to be upgraded. And I will have a cosplay update for you next week. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the like button if you did. Put some comments down below. Have you seen the show? Have you heard of Sailor Moon musicals? Are you planning to go? I would love to hear from you. And of course, if you would like, make sure to hit the subscribe button for more content from me, and I will see you in my next video.